escalation. And as you were talking to us, Matthew, we're playing in the latest pictures of some of the refugees trying to get on trains or trying to get out of Ukraine. And what's compelling is just looking at them, the way they're dressed. These are prosperous, I'm loath to use the expression, these are prosperous middle-class people. These are not obviously refugees trying to get away from areas in the Middle East that are still in a big state of war. These are not people trying to get away from areas in North Africa. They look like any European family that you would live next door to.
They look like any European family that you would live next door. It is Tuesday, March 1st, 2022. Welcome to the latest edition of the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. Over the past several days, people across the world have witnessed an escalating crisis in Ukraine. At the same time, we've also witnessed anti-Blackness, where European residents have been given preference in fleeing the region and where Black exchange students waited hours before being allowed to leave. And to be clear, some Black residents in the Ukraine remain in limbo. Media coverage has also sparked outrage as many reporters have openly expressed a preference for European immigrants, as you just saw in that one example. Certainly, Black immigrants in the U.S. are facing their own challenges. Black immigrants' rights groups have long warned about the consequences of anti-Blackness and the unique vulnerability of Black undocumented folk. Many remember the crisis at the southern border where Haitians were seen being whipped by a mounted policeman. But mistreatment of Black immigrants is widespread. We discussed this morning with Attorney Haddy Gassama, the Policy and Advocacy Director of the UndocuBlack Network, and NMPA journalist Barrington, Salmon, and also the Westside Gazette's publisher, Bobby Henry in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Let's bring on, before we go to our headlines, Bobby Henry of the Westside Gazette and Barrington Salmon, NMPA's journalist extraordinaire. Hey, good morning, guys.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Good to see you. First, we begin with a programming note. The programming note is that you guys be sure to join us this Friday live from Orlando when we attend the Disney Dreamers Academy, an educational mentorship program created and hosted by Walt Disney World Resort, marking its 15th year of broadening career awareness and creating exclusive opportunities for Black students and teens from underrepresented communities across America. The program introduces the Disney Dreamers to an array of new immersions designed to continue to foster the dreams of young leaders beyond imagination, including career building workshops, networking sessions, mentorship connections, and introductions to future professional opportunities at the Walt Disney Company and beyond. So join us live, Let It Be Known, Friday from Walt Disney World in Florida. We begin today, nearly 3 months after the death of former New Orleans Saints defensive end Glenn Foster Jr. His grieving family has received no answers from authorities in Pickens County, Alabama, where Foster was taken into custody halfway through his drive from New Orleans to Atlanta on a business trip. They have no official autopsy results, no incident reports, no explanation from the sheriff's department that was transporting Foster when he died. His widow, Pamela Foster, told ESPN that every day you want to make a story in your head, but nothing adds up. So it is very difficult. It is very hard to grieve when you are trying to put pieces of this puzzle together and the pieces are just not there because there is no transparency. The only thing Alabama officials have said is that Foster, who was 31, was found unresponsive in a police vehicle on December 6th after being transported from the Pickens County Jail to a hospital a half hour away in Northport for a mental health evaluation, they said. Alabama State Bureau of Investigations is looking into his death. It should also be noted that civil rights groups have documented a history of lynchings in Pickens County, and in recent years, a police presence that continues to be hostile toward African Americans. So Barrington and Bobby, this young football star lost his life while being transported in a police car, and there are no answers.
Yeah, you know, Stacey, I was looking at a documentary recently, and it was chronicling how the penal system is set up, and Alabama and Mississippi were two of the main culprits that would falsely arrest and imprison black boys and black men to use for free labor. Now, some of the same instances, or some of the same circumstances that I was reading about as it pertains to Brother Foster were similar to the ones documented in this series on the penal systems in Alabama and Mississippi. And so I'm wondering, since we have that correlation, the suspect of a mental the incapacity, the mental capacity of Brother Foster in this situation, of which it went on to say that he was in an altercation with a gentleman who tried to steal his socks. And we know that if you're incarcerated, you got to protect yourself and your belongings. So we don't know the full detail, and they're not saying of how Brother Foster was defending himself in this situation. They don't say anything about it other than he was to be evaluated for his mental capacity, which gives them the right to basically do anything that they want to do to this brother. And this is not the first case. And if we don't step up, Barrington, we will continue to have cases like this.
Yeah, it reminds me of Sandra Bland, where
strikingly similar, right?
Some white boy with too much power just decided that he was gonna manhandle a black woman. Bobby is better than me. I don't believe anything they said.
Mm-hmm.
These guys are liars. And every time that you come upon cases like this, you see the discrepancy between their reports and what really happened. I mean, if we had listened to the cops in Ahmaud Arbery's case, we would have thought that he was some wannabe criminal who was running through the neighborhood, and some good and honest white men shot him to stop him from trying to rob somewhere. So, this is just indicative of the cancer that is so-called criminal justice in this country, and speaks to the need in the most urgent manner to tear it down.
Yeah, we have not gotten away from the slave catchers mentality when it comes to these police departments. And yes, Barrington, I'm with you now. I'm not giving this the credibility to these people.
Yeah.
I'm just pointing out, man, that we got some situations.
Well, Bobby, let me interrupt, because our president and CEO has joined us. Dr. Benjamin Chavis, the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, joins us now. Good morning, Dr. Chavis. And Dr. Chavis is not joining us. Well, there he is.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm glad to be here, and we had the last day. This is the first day of the continuation of Black History Month. It's also Women's History Month.
Yeah.
And so we continue to make history. I was in the White House yesterday, and President Biden reaffirmed the nomination of Sister Brown Jackson, to be on the Supreme Court. Another historic day.
Yeah, and so Dr. Chavis has declared March to be Black History Month as well. So we appreciate that, Doc. Suburban St. Louis
and Women's History Month.
And Women's History.
Black women, yes.
Well, also in the news this morning, the Suburban St. Louis School District has reversed its earlier decision to remove a book from its school libraries in the face of criticism and class action lawsuits. The Wentzville School Board on Friday accepted a review committee's recommendation to retain Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, which it had previously banned because of its explicit descriptions of sex, violence, rape, and incest. Daniel Bryce, the board's vice president, said the district should tighten its policies regarding some books, but he noted that parents already had the right to request that certain titles not be available to their children. So here we go with the critical race theory again. This time it's in St. Louis, in that county there. I know, Barrington, you have looked at this issue a whole lot. Give us your overview of this in about 35 seconds.
No, I just, the more things change, the more they remain the same. This is just a repeat of white backlash against Black progress. And it's interesting because as I've been investigating all of these book issues around critical race theory, it's not a grassroots effort. It's an effort financed by Robert Mercer and all of these other right-wing money people who are invested in making sure that the culture wars continue, that they stoke up resentment among Trumpists and Trump supporters and conservative and scared white people who, as Dr. Chabis mentions many times, they're afraid of the browning of America, and they're afraid of losing their place of position, privilege, and power. And what we're seeing as a result of that.
Yeah. Well, also in the news this morning, 6 nationally renowned litigators led by Ben Crump announced the launch of a first of its kind organization to combat the startling lack of diverse attorney leadership in lawsuits that disproportionately impact communities of color. The group is called Shades of Mass. They were founded by Crump and several co-chairs. It intends to address the stark divide between corporate harm done to communities of color by product defects, device malfunctions, and environmental hazards, and the minuscule percentage of non-white attorneys selected to lead the litigation in such matters. According to a law.com report, between 2016 and 2019, only 5% of leadership appointments in multi-district litigations went to non-white lawyers. In addition to advocating for and facilitating the appointment of Black and brown attorneys to leadership roles in federal and state-based centralized civil actions, Shades of Mass seeks to remedy the gap in representation through mentorship, advocacy, networking, and education. So we're going to continue to follow. Attorney Crump has certainly done more than made a mark in the civil rights movement, and certainly on the legal front.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. You know, Attorney Crump is a native of North Carolina. Bobby Henry and I know him very well, the Crump family. And, you know, we need more freedom-fighting attorneys. We need more freedom-fighting judges. We need more African-Americans to take the place of some of these district attorneys, some of these prosecutors. You know, we have to not just react to the injustice, but the actions to prevent further injustice. So what Attorney Trump is doing is leading the way, again, to make sure that this whole idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion is just not something rhetorical, but it has meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Chabis, Bobby Henry, and Barrington, Salmon, this morning, Black immigrants. Over the past several days, people across the world have witnessed an escalating crisis in Ukraine. At the same time, we are also witnessing anti-Blackness, where European residents have been given preference in fleeing the region, and where Black exchange students waited hours before being allowed to leave. Let's bring on the Attorney Haddy Gassama of UndocuBlack. Good morning, Attorney Haddy. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Good morning, Stacey. So glad to be here.
Well, first and foremost, it's great to have you. Give us a brief overview of your organization.
Sure. The UndocuBlack Network is a multi-generational network of currently and formerly undocumented Black immigrants. And we cover everything from federal policy and advocacy work to media and narrative work, because we know so often that our narratives and experiences are willfully erased or ignored in the mainstream media, as well as community engagement and wellness work.
So, Attorney Gassama, we've seen, and in fact, I think our producer has another video to put up. We're going to take a look at that as well, but we saw the report at the top of this show, and how that reporter described European immigrants or European people. He said that they were like your neighbors. I'm sure you've seen a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, I have. It's just really disheartening to see. But as UndocuBlack stated in our formal remarks around this issue, for an organization like ourselves, none of this is shocking, unfortunately. It is that same lack of empathy or seeing humanity in Black folks who are fleeing the same conflict as white folks that is rampant in the way the news is covering it, as well as in the treatment of folks who are trying to flee this conflict zone as it's developing day by day.
Yeah, and I want to bring back Barrington Salmon as well, because a friend this morning sent me an email or a message, and what she said was really startling. She says, "I'm opposed to war, but I am more opposed or against racism." And what she's seeing in the Ukraine, she said, it makes it harder to root for the Ukraine in this conflict.
Yeah, I put a post up on Facebook talking about what I'd seen and read and heard about the treatment of Africans, African Ukrainians, and Roma people that they used to call gypsies. They have been blocking them from leaving. And when I saw the reports, they weren't even allowing them to get on trains. They pushed them off and said that they needed to wait. Some were there for 7, 8, 9 hours. Others were there for days. And it tells you, it gives you a good indication of just how insidious racism is. That even as they're getting bombed, even as they're getting killed, they refuse to show humanity to anybody but white people. And I mean, this it gives us an opportunity to compare and contrast how Syrians were treated, how Africans from North Africa and other parts of Africa, when they really started coming in large numbers in 2015, and how Hungary closed the border, Poland closed the border, and other places were like, we don't want those people here. You know, I read something yesterday, and somebody who they were talking to, some official was saying, we don't want them here because they might be terrorists. And so
I'm sorry, Barrington, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm just going to say that, you know, we're constantly confronting stereotypes and lies and distortions. And as Haddy said, people that are unwilling to acknowledge our humanity.
Yeah, and so Attorney Haddy Gassama, some of the things that you're hearing and seeing, and just describe maybe one incident, if you will, 1 or 2 incidents, and what UndocuBlack Network is aiming to do here.
Yeah, I think the first step is, and I again thank you all for covering this, is actually bringing attention to it. As I said, so often it's very easy for our experiences to be swept under the rug, or there needing to be a higher evidentiary requirement to prove that this is actually going on. But I guess in the digital age, where we are able to have photos where Black students are live tweeting their experiences at the Polish border, for example, it's sort of hard to deny what exactly is going on. The incidents we've heard, for example, I think that video might be of the trains where these are trains leaving to safe zones, are that the Ukrainian government has instated martial law. So not allowing any men between the age of 18 and 60 to leave the country. So the way this train works is that they were supposed to have preference for women and children, and ideally non-Ukrainian men who are now charged to stay and fight. But we saw that people were blocking the way. They were, creating human chains, literally blocking the way for Black women and children to get on the train. We've seen also images right outside the Polish border, I believe it was, where babies, these are babies who are still using feeding bottles, are in 1 or single digit temperatures waiting outside to be let in, and they're constantly being told with their parents that they have to go to the back of the line, go to the back of the line. Even that term back of the line is so, I think, for Black folks anywhere in the world, just incredibly triggering in one way or another. All of our, I think, communities have experienced this idea of wait your turn or go to the back of the line, pretty much deprioritizing our needs. So I think as UndocuBlack, our call to action is really one for this to be acknowledged for what it is, which is anti-Blackness, which we, again, as Barrington mentioned, is it's universal. It happens everywhere. I think the other thing is really that whether it be the federal US government, international organizations, or even immigrants' rights organizations that are rightfully making the call for open borders to these Ukrainian refugees and protection for Ukrainian folks who are in the United States so that they're not deported back to a war zone, that there should also be an acknowledgement of this unique and very sort of precarious situation that Black migrants in Ukraine are facing.
Yeah, and Attorney Gassama, some I've seen people say something like this, which I don't know how to take it, but they say, well, you knew the war was gonna happen. They had been saying that this was gonna break out. Why didn't they get out sooner? A statement like that, how do you digest that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's frustrating because the same could be said for Ukrainian nationals who live there. Again, I think it's another example of this heightened level of scrutiny that Black folks are always going to get. It's this added layer of having to prove your struggle, if you will. Many of these folks are students. I think a lot of the videos that have come out are actually medical students in this country. So if anyone knows anything about medical school or any other type of higher education, they've lived here for years. You know, to some extent, they've built community in this country. You can't just easily pick up and leave. Also, and you know, I'll just be frank, they come from countries where sometimes there might not be like a direct embassy in Ukraine, or they might not be as proactive, if you will, of getting their citizens out. We know that the US, for example, pushed to have all of their citizens evacuated out of Ukraine, I believe at least a week or two before the actual conflict began. Also, another thing about migration and mobility is it often requires planning and also funds and some sort of support. The images that we've seen people driving, taking trains, and also just outright walking to safe zones in this country. So I think it's a really unfair question, and it's particularly unfair because the same is not being asked of white Europeans who are also fleeing this conflict. We're all watching the same news, we're all watching the same development. If the standard is that you knew this was going to happen, why did you not leave? Then the same can be asked about Ukrainian nationals who are white. Why did they also not leave until, we actually started hearing the shelling and the bombings?
And Barrington, you know that here in America, there are well-documented challenges when it comes to race relations, but we now seeing it in full view on a global scale. What has this also? What lessons have we learned as Black Americans from this experience?
I hope the lesson that Africans in America have learned or are learning is that the fight against white nationalism, white domination is global. You have a lot of folks who I talk to or who I interact with who pretty much say that they have no connection to Africa. They're not interested in being in joining hands with Africans because they're African American. But that is a short-sighted perspective, particularly given the fact that when you talk to people like Mike German, who is a former FBI agent who infiltrated the Klan and other right-wing groups, when he talks about the rise of white, they call it white supremacists, I don't use that word, white nationalists and all these other right-wing groups, it is, you look at things like Steve Bannon going to Europe, to Italy and Poland and Hungary and all these places, and making alliances with these guys. If you do any serious research on what's going on, there's something called the Great Replacement Theory, where these people are afraid of being replaced by Black and brown people, and that is stoking their fear and the backlash that we see. So it would make sense. I hope that those Africans in this country who don't know UndocuBlack, go do some research, spend some money to support the group. Because as I was telling you earlier, they've been in the trenches for a long time, long before Trump came into office, because we need to also remember that this is not an issue that started with Donald Trump. This is an issue that we've been dealing with Republicans and Democrats for years. They have chosen, the Congress has chosen not to pass comprehensive immigration reform. Even now, they have a couple of bills that they're trying to get passed, and that they're stopped because Republicans are like, we don't want these Black people here. Yeah. And what we saw in Texas was just a visual illustration of the challenges that Black people who are trying to get here are dealing with. I'll just say real quickly that if you listen to news reports, you see things going on at the southern border. They would make you feel as if someone seeking asylum is illegal. Trying to seek asylum is illegal. It's not illegal. They have the right to seek asylum. And Trump and now Biden have chosen to use their laws and whatever, Title 42, which said that if you have fear of people coming into the country with COVID, you can block them. Am I right? Yeah. They're using that to ensure that people don't, that Black people don't come into the country. And I want us to read, I want us to know what's going on. Haitians, Colombians, Jamaicans, Afro-Colombians, Afro-Venezuelans, all these folks are stuck in Mexico. And Trump encouraged Mexico to hold them there. That's illegal. Yeah. It's illegal.
Well, Jennifer Farmer writes in that we don't just need DACA. Black people, immigrants need green cards. She says most Black immigrants don't come as children, and DACA doesn't always apply. We need green cards, and also there's a need for TPS for Cameroonians. So that's something to keep in mind. And as we conclude, we want Bobby Henry to get his last thoughts on this matter, and of course, Dr. Chavis, and then we'll allow our esteemed guest, Attorney Haddy Gassama, the policy and oh boy, your title is escaping me all of a sudden. Attorney Haddy, the policy and advocacy director of the UndocuBlack Network, to give a final thought. Bobby, your final thoughts on this.
Okay, right. I'll get right into this. As we begin to celebrate our 195 years of publishing the truth from a Black perspective, I want us to be conscious of one of the greatest abolitionists, if you would, David Walker, and his David Walker's Appeal, who also wrote for the first Black newspaper, the Freedom's Journal, and he stated exactly what we need to be mindful of all of this, the crimes and the injustices perpetrated against us, and it reigns from the consciousness of a systemic racist system rooted in a religion portion of this in slavery, if you will. So I want us to really go back and read as we begin to celebrate 195 years, the David Walker's Appeal, and understand that this did not just happen. It is a planned, vindictive approach to keep us oppressed and not recognized. Undocumented means that we're not recognized. So this is nothing new, and the fight continues, but we got to be the ones who are willing to fight.
Absolutely, Dr. Chavis.
Well, my colleague Bobby Henry said it well, and of course David Walker was also from Wilmington, North Carolina.
Yes, sir.
Chased out of the state and died mysteriously up in Boston after he wrote the appeal, and after he started writing for Freedom's Journal. They put a bounty on his head because they did not want his truth. And we in the Black press for 195 years, as Bobby has alluded to, and we're celebrating this year throughout 2022. I just want to thank Sister Attorney Gassama for her great work. I think that UndocuBlack needs to be supported. And we in the Black press, we definitely will. God bless everybody.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Chambers. And Attorney Haddy Gassama, just a quick thought, quick closing thought on this topic, because I know it's extremely important to you.
Yeah, before I even do the closing thought, just thank you all again so much for this fruitful conversation. I think what I will say is honestly, it sums up what Barrington said, what Jennifer mentioned in the comments. It's really that, again, anti-Blackness is universal. This concept of white nationalism and just racism and xenophobia in general is endemic in all forms of immigration enforcement, whether here in the States or abroad. This idea of there being a higher standard of proof for Black migrants in particular before they're provided their international human right to seek refuge from conflict or to seek asylum in the case of Black folks at the southern border of the US is also something that we see often. I just quickly also want to raise that for any government or any organization that is doing any work around the Ukraine conflict, it would be not only irresponsible, but I think to a certain level, they would be making a choice again to willfully ignore the experiences of Black migrants if they're not naming it outright, not skirting around it, not making it like the last sentence in small print in a byline or something, but really naming it and calling it what it is, which is blatant racism and anti-Blackness play out in the worst of situations that we can imagine.
Well, Attorney Haddy Gassama of UndocuBlack Network, we certainly appreciate you this morning. Appreciate Barrington Salmon as always, and Bobby Henry, and of course our President and CEO, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. Join us each morning, Monday through Friday, 7:30, where the Black Press's Let It Be Known continues to bring you conversations like this and news and information that matters to the Black community and the Black community abroad as well. We will see you tomorrow morning.